And it is, right here. Oh, okay, so today is May the 24th, May 24, 2002. And I'm reading this book from a grandfather's heart. And today I'm going to do the second section. So the second section is right here. It's called My Family and Yours. So it's a pretty big section. So I'm only going to do the first half of it. Okay, I'm going to read through the first half of it. So this here is page 10. So starting here on page 10, and so right here you get a lot of writing. So it's, first it says my ancestors. Okay, so my ancestors, countries my ancestors came from. Well, my father Francisco was born in Mexico, and my mother Mary Louise was born here in Los Angeles. And I think I forgot to mention that I was born in Los Angeles, California last time. So my mom was born here in Los Angeles, and her family came from Mexico. So my grandmother, my grandfather, and my mother's side, both of them were from Mexico. I know my grandmother, my mother's mother, my maternal grandmother, she was born in Zacatecas, in the central part of Mexico. And then when they married, they moved up to Juarez, which is on the Mexican side of El Paso. And then after they got married, my grandfather, um, they moved to El Paso, Texas. My grandfather started working for the railroad, and he helped build the railroad in the early 1900s. He helped build the railroad from El Paso, Texas to Los Angeles, and that's how my mother's family came to Los Angeles. My father was born, I believe, in Michoacan, Mexico, in the central part of Mexico. He grew up in Tijuana, which is across the border from San Diego. And when he was in his 20s, he came over to Los Angeles, to the United States, looking for work. And he started working, and that's where he met my mom. Okay, what I know about my family name. Well, it's an interesting thing. Villagomez is not a very common last name in the Mexican culture. There's a lot of very common names, Garcia and Cortez and Hernandez and Velasquez and Maravillas. But as far as my understanding is, the Villagomez name came from Spain. When the Spaniards conquered Mexico, the Villagomez family came too. And they settled in the central part of Mexico around Jalisco and Michoacan. Okay, so in school, you're going to learn about Hernan Cortez, and he was the conqueror of Mexico. He from Spain. And so Mexico, present day Mexico, used to be called New Spain. That's why they speak Spanish. Everything from Mexico all the way to the South Pole and the Americas used to belong, the majority of it used to belong to Mexico. So that's why everybody here speaks Spanish. Okay. And at that time, when the Spaniards came over, the tradition was primogenitor. So that means that the firstborn, that the eldest would inherit the land. Okay. But then what would happen if you were the second-born, or the third-born son, or the fourth-born? Well, a lot of them, they came over, and that's how they prospered. They became the ruling class, the upper class in the Latin American cultures. So a lot of them had large land grants, the European-born second sons of these conquistadores that came over. An interesting family legend. Well, in the early 1900s, during one of Mexico's civil wars, my grandfather, Miguel, my grandfather was my father's father, walked into a village. He was arrested by the army because they thought he was a spy for the rebels. He tried to convince them that he wasn't, and they were going to shoot him the next day. So they put him into a prison. Okay, the next day a soldier came to town. I think he was like a sergeant or an officer. He knew my grandfather, and when he found out that they were going to shoot him, the soldier told everybody that he knew him and not to shoot. So it's interesting because I don't know, you see it right here, my hand right here. where I put it up and roll it this way, in front of the camera. It's not always steady, it has a tendency to tremble sometimes. And my dad does that too a little bit. And we were talking about it one time. He says, "Oh, my grandfather, his father does that too." And he told me the story. So this is where they think, I don't know how true it is, that it's hereditary, so to speak, like that. But yeah, so that's where, that's an interesting little story. So from probably about 100 years ago or so, 1920s. Okay, page 11 says celebrations of our heritage, family foods. Well, I put down some foods that I really enjoyed when I was growing up that my mom made for me. Chili rellenos. I know when she made chili rellenos, oh, I loved them. I couldn't just have one or two. I had to eat them all. But in a large family, you had to share. Okay. Fried rice and beans, tortillas, hamburgers. And when we had hamburgers, my mom didn't put them in hamburger buns. We had regular slices of bread. So imagine just a regular slice of bread as your hamburger bun. That's what we had. Menudo, tamales. Tamales was a Christmas tradition. It always was, and it always is. Lentil soup for during the Lent season. So that's just the time just before Easter. So those were, we ate most Hispanic, most Mexican type foods. We also had American type foods. We would have our hot dogs and pizzas once in a while, but mostly fried rice and beans. That's what we ate mostly day to day. Family traditions. I really didn't put much here. Family trips to Tijuana to visit my family during the summertime. So mostly we visited my dad's family. They lived down in Tijuana. Sometimes they came up and they visited us. Making tamales for Christmas was a big part of the family tradition. And, just going camping trips during the summer. That's something that my dad always did. A family saying, I left that blank. Honestly, I can't think of anything in particular that was said all the time in our family. I'm pretty sure we talked to one of my brothers. They could probably think of something right away. Page 12 and 13, I'm going to leave that blank because it's just looking for family pictures. And I'm pretty sure you'll be able to find a whole bunch of pictures all around. Okay, moving on page 14, it says memories of my mother. My mother's name, Mary Louise. Well, I put Villa Gomez, but her maiden name was Garcia, Mary Louise Garcia. What I called her, Mom. Okay, I called my mother Mom. Things she was good at or liked to do. Well, my mom did everything. She cooked, she cleaned, she took care of us. All 8 of my brothers and sisters and myself. And I don't know how she did it all. She liked to tell stories and dance and laugh. And one thing that she taught me. Well, there's a lot I learned from my mom, but I think the one thing I'll remember most is how she and my dad got along. They were married before my mom passed. They were married for about 56 years, which is a long time. Sometimes you can tell when mom is mad at dad. And I bet you can do that, right? You can tell when your mom is mad at dad for whatever reason. Okay. I never remember them yelling or fighting in front of us. As a kid, you can tell when mom is mad at dad. But I never once saw them fight or yell or anything in front of us. Now, my wife and I, Grandma Sue and I, sometimes we would fight, and I'm pretty sure your mom can tell stories about that. But my mom, they never did. So what I learned from that is they always found a way to work things out. I think that was really special. No matter how bad or how hard times got, they always found a way to work things out. Page 15, a fond or funny memory. Well, one day when I was in high school, I didn't come home. My mom started to worry. I never came home late. So after a while, she came looking for me. Where was I? Where I was behind B building. And your mom knows where B building is at Sure High School. That's where I went to school. And I was behind B building with a girl. We just started talking, and I forgot what time it was. I was enjoying just being with her when I heard my name. My mom was calling me. So I went from the back of the building to the front of the building. And when I saw my mom, she was down in the little courtyard area. And, you know, what are you doing? Where have you been? And that's when this little girl came up right behind me. And at that time, her name was Judy. And that was in 1974. So I was about 15, 16 years old. I was a young boy in puppy love at that time. Let's just put it that way. So, and I'm pretty sure your mom's got questions about that. All right, moving right along. Fond memories of my father. My father's name, Francisco Perez Villagomez. And what did I call him? Dad. Things he was good at or liked to do. Well, my dad was always working. He was a meat cutter, and often he worked part-time at the CYO, which is the Community Youth Organization, cutting meat also. He did that part-time. He didn't always used to do that. When I was really, really young, I remember him spending a lot of time with us, and we were going camping and doing a whole bunch of fun stuff. But as our family grew, remember I said I got 5 brothers and 2 sisters, eight kids. So it got to the point where my dad had to do, you know, work extra in order to do things. One thing he taught me, a work ethic. Always do your best. Remember, your paycheck doesn't come from the company, it comes from the customers. I used to work in the supermarket. I started as a box boy when I was 16, and I worked my way up to working on the check stand and working in the back and as a clerk and doing a whole bunch of other stuff. And I got promoted. It was toward the end of the time I was there. I worked 17 years with them. In the last few years, I was sort of like the third man. I'm sort of like the assistant manager of one of the stores. And I learned a lot of things back then. But the most important thing is what I learned from my dad is to remember customer service. Wherever you're working, whatever you choose to do, you know, it's not so much you represent the company, but also think about the customers. That's so important. A fond or funny memory on page 17. Well, when I was very young at our Malabar house, I remember my dad spent a lot of time with us. And we were in the Boy Scouts. I was in the Boy Scouts when I was 8 years old and 9, 10. My dad was a scout leader. And I remember he was in charge of the Webelos. And the Webelos were a part of the Boy Scouts. They were the bigger boys. They were like the 5th and 6th graders. And they were a tough bunch of kids, and they were a hard time. It was hard for my dad to keep control. And my dad always had a really soft heart, but he got really frustrated with those kids, trying to get them to mind and pay attention and follow directions. And instead of doing that, a lot of times they just kind of goofed around a lot. All right, so I'm going to keep it short. I'm going to leave it here at this part, and then I'll do the rest of it next time, because I want to keep these videos not too long. And it has a little spot down here, my father and me. Okay, and again, I'm going to leave that blank because I'm pretty sure that we can find a picture of my dad somewhere, or grandpa. Okay, talk to you later.